Now, please welcome Karine Jean-Pierre to the stage for our panel.
Hello, hi. Oh, hi. Thank you for that incredibly warm welcome. I'm excited. Are you guys excited? I'm so excited to be here. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for spending your Friday morning with us. It is a privilege to be here at the Victory Institute Annual Leadership Conference, a gathering that celebrates and strengthens LGBTQ plus leadership across the nation. So this plenary shines a light on a truth that is both sobering and inspiring. LGBTQ plus women remain underrepresented in public office. Yet, their leadership is reshaping the front lines of justice in the U.S. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from 3 groundbreaking attorneys general, trailblazers who are not only making history by holding some of the highest legal offices in their states, but also redefining what it means to lead with courage, conviction, and authenticity. In a time when federal attacks on LGBTQ plus people, civil rights, and social justice are intensifying. These leaders stand at the forefront of resistance. They wield the authority of their offices to protect vulnerable communities, defend hard-won progress, and ensure that the promise of equality, is not eroded, but expanded. This conversation is not just about policy or politics. It is about the lived experience of navigating high-stakes challenges in a volatile national landscape. It is about the resilience required to lead boldly when the stakes are highest. And it is about charting a path forward that builds the next generation of LGBTQ plus women in elected leadership, ensuring that their voices and perspectives continue to shape the future of justice in America. So we are fortunate to be joined this morning by 3 extraordinary leaders, and I am going to let them come out here, and you all get to meet them, and I'll introduce them when we all sit down, but it's very exciting. Come on out. Come on.
Going out tonight, I'm feeling alright. Gonna let it all hang out.
So these 3 extraordinary leaders, I cannot believe it. Thank you so much for being here. I have to my right Ann Lopez, Attorney General of Hawaii, who has brought a sharp focus on integrity, accountability, and protecting the rights of Hawaiian across diverse community. Kris, Attorney General of Arizona, a champion of democracy and civil rights, whose leadership is vital in safeguarding voting rights and defending vulnerable populations in a rapidly changing state. Dana Nessel, Attorney General of Michigan, and it is exciting to have you all here. She is a nationally recognized advocate for equality and justice who has led landmark efforts to protect LGBTQ plus rights and ensure that the law serves all people fairly. Thank you so much for being here this morning. So we have set the stage, I believe, for an incredible conversation. We have the 3 of the best out there who are doing just God's work. in this time. And so this conversation, I believe, is incredibly important. It matters. And so we will begin with each of them giving an opening statement and just sharing their thoughts in this moment. So I'm going to hand it over to Attorney General Lopez. The floor is yours.
Excellent, thank you. I want to get started in the way we get started in Hawaii, and that is by starting with aloha. Aloha. You can do better. Aloha. Aloha. Right on, that's the way we start our day. I'm really thrilled to be here and thankful to the Victory Institute for inviting me to be here. And I am honored to be sitting on this panel with these three amazing women. In Hawaii, the Attorney General is appointed, then confirmed by the Senate. Most important thing is that the governor can't fire me without a 2/3 vote from the Senate. So even in an incredibly blue state like Hawaii, you can never get 2/3 of the Senate and the governor to agree on anything. So I feel good about my job security at this point. And all of this is to say that, unlike my colleagues on the stage, I don't have ideological zealots opposing me every day, trying to come up with new crazy ideas. I don't have the burden of doing my job and running for election at the same time. Having that kind of pressure, in addition to doing their job, is phenomenal, and I'm thankful that I don't have to do it. Much of what we are doing right now, though, changed 381 days ago, when this administration commenced its assault on our democracy. I never thought I would be a leader of an office that is actually, when you think about it, actually fighting for democracy. It's inconceivable to me that this is the position that I'm in. What I want everybody to hear and know is that on January 20th, the Democratic Attorneys General were already prepared, already collaborating, and already dedicated to this fight in the short term and in the long run. We continue that fight every day, and I'm thankful that I have two of these really amazing, powerful women who participate in that group with me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Attorney General Kris Mayes.
Hi, everybody. Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here, and it's great to be with my colleagues. You know, I just first want to start by saying thank you to you and to Victory. Some of you know that I won my race for Attorney General in Arizona in 2022 by 280 votes out of 2.5 million in the closest statewide race in Arizona history. Victory was there for me. I deeply appreciate that. They don't call me Landslide Mays for nothing. So, you know, just always know that your political participation, your campaign dollars, your volunteer time, it matters, especially in very, very closely divided states like Arizona and Michigan that will probably be for a long time close states. And so I am sitting here with my colleagues able to do this incredibly important work to protect American democracy because of you. Because of 280 votes. And I know we'll talk more about it, but in Arizona, with these two and the other 23 Democratic AGs, have sued Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Doge 32 times on behalf of the state of Arizona. Saving Arizona $1.5 billion. Dana and Ann may probably have saved even more because they've done more lawsuits, but the point is, you helped put me here, and at this time in our nation's history, it's so incredibly important. I'll just end by saying this. I often get asked this question by reporters, which is, Kris, Donald Trump won your state in 2024. Don't you think you're suing him too much? Aren't you worried you're going to lose your reelection? Aren't you worried about retaliation? And I always say, look, I'm a 54-year-old woman, and if all I ever do with the rest of my life is spend the next year and a half standing up for American democracy, I'll be okay with it.
Attorney General Nessel?
Well, I don't know how to top these guys. And I should tell you what has made this job easier in a very difficult time period, a very busy time period for the attorneys general, the Democratic attorneys general, I should say, is that we have a team that's very collegial, and the Democratic AGs, it's not just that we work together really well, we actually like each other. It's just an honor and a privilege to be able to do that. For me, I came into this office from having worked in the LGBTQ legal space, handling the same-sex marriage case in Michigan that got consolidated with the other Sixth Circuit cases that had ended up going to the Supreme Court on Obergefell. It just seemed like there was no looking back. We were going to make so much progress with that amazing United States Supreme Court at our backs. And so it's been a little challenging. You might remember if you watched the DNC convention last year that I talked about my marriage and where the Republican-appointed justices on the United States Supreme Court could go in the event that they tried to do anything to overturn same-sex marriage, not realizing that I would have to have my department appear many times again before that same United States Supreme Court, and that they would remember and give me many mean looks in the meantime. So this has definitely been a challenging time, but obviously working together with the other AGs and the fact that we don't win every case, but we've been phenomenally successful for the most part. And in my state, it's well over $2 billion at this point that we've recovered that the federal government illegally, unconstitutionally, tried to take from us. And as I try to remind people, that money, that's our money. I mean, Michigan and Arizona and Hawaii taxpayers paid that money to the federal government. Businesses paid that money to the federal government. And then it gets appropriated by this crazy body that used to be impactful, that maybe you've heard of, called Congress. And they appropriate the money, and through government agencies and sometimes in other ways, it gets appropriated back to us. And so it's just been bewildering, the fact that our Republican colleagues are not just as interested in fighting for the money their states deserve to have. But we've worked great together as a team, and I think we've done a really good job. But there are many, many more fights yet to come. And I know that whatever happens, we're going to be in this fight together.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for me. Thank you. So I'm going to start with my first question. I'm going to go to my Attorney General to the right here, Attorney General Lopez. You each lead in states with very different political climates. How does your state's environment shape the strategies you pursue to protect our civil rights?
Well, it's an interesting question because of the 23 Democratic attorneys general, we all come from very different political landscapes. And that means that every AG needs to look at their landscape to figure out, is this a case I need to step up and be the face of? Is this a case I can join? Or is this one I need to step back from to protect, as the mayor was saying, the long game. What do we need to look at down the road? And in Hawaii, of course, we are predominantly Democratic. We've had some purple cracks over the last few years that are concerning. But when I think about the civil rights issues that we're dealing with, I think in Hawaii, we don't have these singular issues that come up like in Texas and different states. Where our civil rights issues really arise is in our high cost of living, our difficulty accessing health care, and education. And so our governor is a physician, and our focus really is on the health and well-being of the residents. So for Hawaii, when I look at these cases, we do focus on vaccines, on SNAP, on all public health benefits, the right for a doctor and their patient to have confidential conversations to make decisions about themselves. And so for Hawaii, that has been kind of the area that we have decided to put our foot in front and take lead.
Attorney General.
Yeah, I mean, great question. You know, Arizona, as you can imagine, I mean, we are politically very evenly divided. We're a third Republican, a third Democratic, and a third independent. And so you couldn't get a swingier state than Arizona. Maybe Michigan, I don't know. But you know, my approach to it is I do everything I can on civil rights as I possibly can, given the laws that I inherited from, you know, basically 2 decades of Republican rule in Arizona. But so we don't have the same civil rights state laws that Hawaii and Michigan have. I know for a fact Dana has some great ones. Because, by the way, we do a podcast together called Pantsuits and Lawsuits, if you don't know about it. She's very funny, as you can tell, and it's very entertaining. So you can hear all about everything that we've done in our states. But
Great
so,
plug, Kris.
Thank you. Thank you. Subscribe, download. Anyway,
Subscribe, everybody.
Yeah.
Subscribe.
So we do the best we can, and so for one of the things that I did as soon as I took office was we revived our civil rights board inside my office. We are enforcing our civil rights laws to the degree that we possibly can. We have housing discrimination that we enforce. We don't have a great hate crimes law that, for instance, that I think both Hawaii and Michigan have, but we're enforcing it as much as we can. And then to Ann's point, you know, we are focusing on the things that are really important in Arizona. I'll give you a quick example of that. I think it is a civil right to be protected against the fentanyl crisis, or it is certainly a right of Arizonans to be protected against fentanyl and the drugs coming across our border. It is an issue. Well, what has Donald Trump done on that issue? As he seeks to send every federal agent, including ATF, DEA, FBI, HSI, off to Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, LA, to chase around after landscapers and gardeners and immigrants, hardworking immigrants, he is taking those agents away from Arizona, where they should be helping me prosecute the Mexican drug cartels. That is what is happening. And it is making, that's right, it is making our states less safe. I mean, nobody has done more to defund the police than Donald John Trump has. And let's be very clear about that. And you know, sending these agents, sometimes they're being forced to spend 50% of their time or more on these crazy missions in the interior of the country. And so, you know, we need to continue to put pressure, you know, on the administration to do what is right for our states and, you know, end their, you know, their crusade against hardworking immigrants and put their focus back on where it should be, and that's fighting crime. That is our job as the top law enforcement officers of our state.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Thank you. What's the name of the podcast again?
The Pantsuits and Lawsuits.
Pantsuits and... All right, guys.
Pantsuits.
All right, we got to make sure we subscribe. Attorney General Nessel.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly a difference between the blue states, the deep blue states, and the swing states, or the purple states, in terms of our Democratic AG coalition. And for me, a big problem is that sometimes I'm fighting as hard against the Republicans in the state legislature as I am against Trump at the federal level, and it's hard sometimes to do both simultaneously, and the deep blue states don't really worry about that the same way. And me, constantly dealing with the Republicans in the legislature trying to defund my office. They just proposed some legislation that would actually remove my right to sue the federal government without the approval of the legislature or the governor. And, it is, they're constantly trying to like subpoena me to appear before their, oversight committee, to sort of interfere with the work that we're doing at the office. And like I said, what's so insane about it is that with the billions of dollars that we've brought back as a result of these lawsuits, I always want to say to them, like, which bucket of money would you like us to give back to the federal government? Is it money for cancer research? Is it money for, emergency relief and disasters? Is it for libraries? I mean, and then they don't have a great answer to that question. But it's a little bit difficult because of the constant interference. But with that, you just try to stay true to your principles and your values. And, in terms of our cases, I do what I think is best for my state. And that means, in the event that we have an injury to the people of our state or to the state itself through its state agencies, and if we have, the standing to bring a case and there's a violation of the law or the Constitution, I just do it. And, I sue first and ask questions later.
Yes.
And I think that's what I was elected to do, candidly. And so, but it is hard because the pushback that we get at the, the state government level, and then from a lot of people who are Trump supporters still in the state, fewer and fewer of them as the year goes on. But there are a lot of other things to deal with that when we talk to Rob Bonta in California, or we talk to Tish James in New York, and I bring up these things, they're like, what? Those aren't things that they're dealing with on a daily basis. But not that they don't have other things they're dealing with, Tish James. But true. It does complicate things. But I know for myself, I don't think it's changed the way that I've done my work. I ran on a platform of holding the Trump administration accountable. I was very clear about it. Didn't know I was going to have to do it twice, to be candid with you. Was hoping after the first couple of years, that would be that. But here we are, and so, we just do the best we can. There are a lot of things that I think that should be nonpartisan. Consumer protection should be nonpartisan. And holding the opioid manufacturers and distributors accountable should be nonpartisan. Protecting seniors should be nonpartisan, but in my state, everything ends up becoming partisan somehow, in some way, because that's just the reality of how polarized we are these days. But, I'm just doing all the things that I said I was going to do when I ran, and, I think that's all we can do as elected, leaders in government.
Thank you. So this question, we kind of talked about it, you and I, Attorney General Nessel in the back, which is about hope. And each of you just laid out what you do and have to deal with in each of your states. And looking at the national landscape, what gives you hope? And I think this is an important question because I think people are trying to strive for that or be hopeful. And so, Attorney General Lopez, I'd love to start with you.
Sometimes it's hard to be hopeful. We have won every case at the district court level. I don't think we've lost anything at the district court level. We have won
80%.
most of our cases at the appellate level. And then we get to the United States Supreme Court, who seems to just want to fuck up everything we do on a regular basis. So sometimes it's hard to have hope. But here's what, and I may end up being a little bit provocative, and I don't mean to be, but here's what I think is happening over the last year is, you know, the Democratic Party always talks about its big tent. What it doesn't talk about is that our big tent has a lot of room dividers, so that we've got one group here and another group here, and we're not talking to each other. We have walls between us, and what we've seen in the last years, that those walls are beginning to come down, that we recognize it doesn't matter if it's immigration rights, LGBTQ rights, immigration rights, the right to food, the right to affordable housing. It doesn't matter. People across or under that tent are beginning to come together. And we're seeing it more and more, whether it's at the marches or even you're seeing more and more people, just things like writing letters to the editor saying, this kind of activity is just outrageous. Donald Trump wants to be the guy who stops drugs flooding America while he pardons a man who flooded drugs into America. And so people are beginning to see it, and they're beginning to understand that this is not what they voted for. Yeah. And so the hope that I have is that, first of all, whether you're a Democrat or an independent or even a Republican, if we can lower the walls and we can recognize that we can't help ourselves if we don't help each other at the same time.
Yeah, compassion, pure compassion. And you saw that in the most recent election, how Republicans who voted for Donald Trump just last year crossed over.
Right.
I think people are starting to see that. Go ahead, Attorney
Yeah, I find hope in a couple things. First of all, in my colleagues. I mean, both Dana and Ann have mentioned it, but we work really closely together. And to give you some flavor into the, behind the scenes and how this is happening, how these lawsuits are happening, how what I would call the first part of the resistance, the first phase of the resistance was the Democratic AGs. We met in Philadelphia right after the election and started planning together what the litigation was going to look like, what venues we would need to go into, who was going to work on what lawsuit and who was going to lead, and et cetera. And we meet together, all 23 of us, by Zoom every other day. In person, us. It's awesome to be with them physically, but right here. But we work together like literally several times a week on Zoom, if not more. In the early days, sometimes it was every day by Zoom. And so when Dana said we like each other, it's true, we do, and we get along, and we check our egos at the door, and maybe it's because none of us are running for president. Yet, anyway. Dana and for president, but the governor's different story. Like half of them are running for president. So anyway, but so we get the work done. That gives me hope. And like Ann said, we've won 80% of the cases that we've filed through a TRO or a preliminary injunction. I co-led the tariffs case with Dan Rayfield in Oregon. We went to the Supreme Court, and while they have been a blockade on some things, I think we're going to, knock on wood, win that case. I think we're going to win that case based on what we saw from the justices, and that is an AG case. And then the other thing that gives me hope is, and I call it, when I talk to folks, I say we are going to win through the 3 C's, the courts, and we got that covered, crowds, and you all got that covered, and courage. And I see out there amongst Americans and in the crowds that we're seeing a whole hell of a lot of courage and a lot of people who are, quite frankly, way out and ahead of the politicians, right? Let's face it. And I think we've seen frustration about that. And so when I have had now headlined 2 No Kings rallies plus a hands-off rally, and The one in Phoenix we just had 15,000 people just at the state capitol. And when I got up, it was like the most intense physical experience, one of the most intense physical experiences I've ever had to speak in front of 15,000 people. And I looked out in the crowd and saw so many Vietnam War veteran hats. And same thing up in Prescott, my hometown, where 3,000 people turned out at the very place where Barry Goldwater announced his presidential bid, one of the most conservative places in America where I was born and raised. And I quoted Barry Goldwater on tyranny to 3,000 people and lots of veterans. And that gave me hope. The size of these crowds and the energy behind the crowds and the fact that it's not just Democrats. It's a whole lot of independents and moderate Republicans and veterans who didn't watch their brethren, their brothers and sisters die in Vietnam so that Donald Trump can shred our Constitution. That gives me hope.
Yeah.
Can I add two things really quick? One is I want people to know that our staffs are on the phone every day of the week. We do meet. But I just want to be clear that our staffs, in addition to the work they already do, and we all know that we're already underfunded and we have vacancies and we already have a lot on our hands, but our staff are on the phone every single day talking about all of these issues and helping guide us in our decision making. And the other thing I want to say is we may be the first phase, but we're the only government agencies in the United States of America who have been fighting back against Donald Trump since day one, the 23 Democratic attorneys general.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that was a good add-on. Attorney General Nessel.
23, soon to be 24.
That's true.
Yeah.
24,
Because we
Virginia.
picked up Virginia in the last election. Yeah, I mean, sort of to echo what my colleagues here have said, you know, yes, it's a boost when we win a case in the courts. The No Kings and Hands Off rallies, I committed that I would go to each and every single one of those and that I would pick different parts of the state for each one. And the crowds have just gotten bigger and bigger, and I'm sure a lot of you have looked at some of the articles where they have taken other countries, none as big, as the United States. But, you know, when you have this, you know, quick slide from a democracy into a full-blown dictatorship or autocracy, generally speaking, the only thing that has ever really worked is when 3.5% of the population of that country comes out and peacefully, lawfully protests. And we are seeing that happen. Yeah. But I wondered at the last No Kings rally that I went to, and I went to the west side of the state, and I went to cities that, you know, definitely voted for Trump and sometimes in large numbers, and the crowds were just massive, just huge. Yep. But I wondered, would this translate? Would all these people who were out there with amazing signs, I spent a long time on my sign. Personally, I'm not a graphic design artist or anything, but mine was just, the only king I want is Burger King, because it remains true. But, you know, you had people who, you know, who had never, ever, I was talking to people who were in their 70s or 80s who said, I've never been to a political protest before, never. But I felt like I had to come to this one, and I brought my kids and my grandkids, and they're here now too, because I want them to understand and appreciate how important this is. But I wondered, okay, all these people that are coming to these rallies, like that's great, but will it translate when the election comes? Will it translate into actual ballots cast? And as it turns out, yes, it has. I mean, what we're seeing this momentum, and you know, my great hope is seeing the criminality and the chaos and the corruption that is so flagrant that, I mean, you know, I often say if you took, you know, the worst scandals of every president up until this one and you combine them, that's like a Tuesday in the Trump administration. But but my hope is not just that our country will fight back. And it's not just a combination between, the civilians, the elected officials, but my hope is that our members of the military, our members of the National Guard, that when confronted with, their grandma who's in the streets fighting for her Social Security or fighting for health care for her children or her grandchildren, that National Guard's, man or woman will not shoot grandma in the face. That they will stand up and then they will say, no, that's not what I'm here for. And we've heard a lot lately about the military obeying or not obeying unconstitutional, illegal orders. And I do think that there is the perception that what is happening in the White House right now, that's not representative of who we are as Americans. And so as time moves forward, yes, we're going to keep filing these lawsuits. I hope that, I know many of you are running for various different offices, or you currently hold various different offices. But I think it's a combination of the people and everybody else coming together and saying, we might not agree on everything, but we can agree that we don't want this, and that maybe there's even the opportunity moving forward that we will make corrections to the lapses that we see that have allowed all of this to happen in the first place. There are so many things that until Donald Trump did those things, we were like, I don't even know you can do that. Well, you could just smash down the, East Wing of the White House just all on your own and nobody has to approve that? I didn't know that. Now, I'm not saying that's legal, but I'm saying that there are so many things that until it happened, you never imagined it could. And maybe this will be an opportunity one day, hopefully, to make sure that we have more guardrails in place in a way that we've discovered we don't have them right now. I have faith in the American people, and I think the same way we came out of the worst set of circumstances you can imagine in the 1920s, and I would encourage everybody to read as much as you possibly can about that time period. It looked like we were going straight on into a Christian nationalist dictatorship, but we came back from it, and that was over 100 years ago. So I think we can do the same thing now, but we have to do it fighting together.
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, a moment of opportunity, So I want to take it a little bit on a personal note. So being LGBTQ plus women in statewide office places, you're in a very small group, correct?
Apparently.
Correct, yeah. Correct? There's three, there you go, right? How has your identity personally shaped the way you lead, and how do you navigate the visibility and also the scrutiny that come with that? Attorney General Lopez.
Most people just think I'm a soccer mom, and they don't really think about me in terms of my sexual identity in Hawaii. And so I think that, in fact, I think most people here didn't actually know there were 3 lesbians. There were just 2. It came as a surprise. There was a 3rd one out there. So that my identity isn't...
You got left off your Wikipedia page,
I know.
Right?
I'm still upset about that.
Soccer mom.
So my identity, I don't think, plays a huge part publicly about me or how I lead. But what I do think is that all of us in this room, more so than many others, have had to be introspective about our lives. We've had to think about who we are, and sometimes we've had to make difficult decisions about sharing who we are with other people. And not just difficult because sometimes it's hard emotionally, but it's also dangerous. It can make the difference between whether or not you have housing or you can get a job. And I think from that introspection, where I've come as a leader is to understand that I have to work every day to make sure that the people who work with me know that I respect who they are. I know what their work is. It is absolutely imperative that all of my supervisors be kind and generous to their employees, that we recognize everybody has a struggle that we might not be aware of. And so I guess in my department, and what I think is, I've been successful at, and I think it's working, is that what I bring to my leadership through my own struggles of who I am really is about respecting one another and trying to get through every day, being kind and generous to each other.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. It's interesting, and I was reflecting on this the last couple days. It is probably no accident that there are only 3 of us sitting up here, and I'm looking forward to Dana's answer to this question too, because you were the second. Maura Healey was the first openly gay AG. You're the second. Technically, Ann's the third because she took office 2 weeks before me, and then that makes me the 4th, right?
But her Wikipedia page says she's
She says okay. So anyway, yes, okay, that's true. So, so I'm the first, it's only the second woman to serve as Attorney General in Arizona, and the first openly gay person to serve as Attorney General in Arizona. I think it's. So we are, as I mentioned earlier, we're the top law enforcement officers in our states. So, and I think maybe even more as women, it's just hard to get elected to the top law enforcement officer of any state. We're also top legal officers of our state, and then you add on top of that being gay, that probably makes it harder, I would imagine. But what I think people see in all 3 of us and in me is that they have a fighter. And that's what people want. They want somebody who's going to come to work every day. And maybe my identity is a part of that. And how I have, lived my life is a part of that. But they want somebody who's going to come to work every day, willing and able, and having the intestinal fortitude to fight for them, especially in this moment. And so I think that's a part of it. But I do think, the fact that there are I don't know what the numbers are on how many female AGs there are. There are some Republican female AGs as well. I hang out a lot. My days are spent with hanging out with sheriffs and police chiefs and my own police officers. I have a small police force inside my office of about 60 special agents. We are always proving to everyone, including law enforcement, that we can lead, and we can lead as women and as folks who are openly gay. Dana, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I think obviously it's great that we have 3 lesbians who are attorneys general. I would like to see some gay men and trans women join us. In large part because we're always looking for tips on how to do our hair and makeup, and we don't have that right now. And as lesbians, we have no formal training, as everyone knows. But with that, I ran as a proudly openly gay person because, I'm proud of my family. I'm damn proud of my family. I had to work really hard to have legal rights to my wife and legal rights for both of us to our children. And I'm going to let people know about our family every single chance I get. On election night back in 2018, I proudly did what all people who win big elections do when they're there with their spouse. I made out with my wife. Just to make sure if you didn't catch it during the campaign, you knew that. Because I'm just so absolutely, I'm sick of all of the perpetual, generally it's Republican men who, for some reason, like, why are you so obsessed with us? Still, all the time. And then I see, scandal after scandal. There's this scandal since I've been in office with Republican men and some women in our state. A former Speaker of the House who criminal case came to our attention after it was learned that he was having a long-time sexual relationship with his sister-in-law. He was very critical of the LGBTQ community, always trying to strip us of our rights. Another state rep who allegedly, was with a prostitute, and then as she was running away from him, tried to shoot him. He was very critical of the LGBTQ community. So, I always want to say, like, family values, look at my family. We have family values. I'm not going to say that we may not have possibly violated the ordinance that constrains the number of cats you can have in one household. So it's not as though we're totally free of legal issues altogether. But, I think it's so important that we be openly proud. I make mistakes, though, sometimes because of my gay heritage. And when there were some proposals, some of the Republicans had proposed, banning drag shows from, making sure that children couldn't be exposed to drag queens. And I somewhat memorably responded to that with, like, drag queens are, maybe that's the best thing that's ever happened to us. And if anything, if we're trying to assist children with their mental health and to bring them joy and make them happier, how about this? A drag queen for every school. Totally unpoll tested, as it turned out, and became the subject matter of a $5 million Oppo ad against me in 2022. But you know what? Oh, I still won by 9 points. So, what that tells me is people really love their drag queens, and we just need more of them. And I will run on that platform all day, every day.
Woo! I gotta really listen to this podcast, boy. Wow. So just taking it back for a second to the amazing job that you all do day in and day out. And I wanted to, you guys have covered this a little bit, but I want to do a little deeper dive. Obviously, we've seen the rise in attacks on the legitimacy of elections. We've seen the rule of law literally being thrown out of the window, and even the independence of courts by this current administration. How do these broader democratic threats show up in your day-to-day work as attorney generals, and what role do you believe attorney generals play in safeguarding democracy? Attorney General Lopez.
Well, I think the role is what we're doing every other day and what our staff is doing every day, and that's holding this administration accountable for their unconstitutional and illegal actions. That they just seems to be second nature, that if it's something unconscionable, they will do it. And so our role is to every day continue to be this bulwark against this assault. I think that from in a national perspective is what we need to be doing. I think on the local perspective, again, it's really obvious that I come from a very different environment than these two. But what I'm seeing and what I'm trying to encourage the people around us in this fight is it can't just be us. We need everybody. And if that means that some of my friends who are retired start going to sit in court so that they can be observers and witnesses to what's happening to immigrants, and they can report on it, that they go and they read to children because children need to learn how to read, and if we don't have universal education and health care, our children are going to grow up uneducated and allow this sort of the hypocrisy of what's happening right now to continue. So I'm not sure that really answers the question. I just know that locally, we all have to start lifting each other up again. The Democratic Party used to do that. We used to lift people and their lives, and we don't do that very much anymore, and we have to rededicate ourselves to that.
Yeah, that's right. Speak the truth. Attorney General Means.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that our elections continue to be under attack from, primarily Republican elected officials and certainly from Donald Trump. We have already beaten back as AGs at least one attempt by Trump to commandeer the elections processes of every state. We won that lawsuit, or at least got, I think, a PI or a TRO against it. We have fabulously run elections in all of our states, and that the good news is we have a decentralized elections system in this country that is run by local officials. We have had, attacks at the local level by those who, associates of Donald Trump. For instance, in Arizona, one of the things I campaigned on in 2022 was protecting our elections officials. In Arizona, in 2022 and 2023, we lost a top elections official in 2/3 of our counties because of death threats or threats of violence. One election official in Yavapai County, my home county, very conservative county, she was a Republican, had her dog poisoned to death because she didn't overthrow the election, and she wasn't willing to overthrow the election. I think it was the 2020 election. We have had efforts by, again, associates and allies of Trump to do what they call hand counts in our counties, which is just an effort to try to slow down the counting of the votes and throw a wrench into things. And then I won't speak to it much because I can't. We have ongoing cases, both Dana and I do. We both have fake electors cases that are ongoing. So, this is still a huge threat, and we have to just continue to be vigilant about it. We have to protect our elections officials. We have to protect our elections processes from attempted commandeering by the federal government. And then I guess what keeps me up at night really is what could come down the road in terms of potential attempts at intimidation by federal agents at polling places, or even the National Guard, the federalization of the National Guard or troops. You could see a situation in which they attempt to bring the troops out to harass and intimidate people who go to the polls. My state, almost 90% of Arizonans vote by mail, so it may not be as impactful as it would be in other states, but certainly it's something that I think we all worry about and will be working on as AGs.
Go ahead, Attorney General.
Yeah, so protecting our elections has become sort of a major feature of this office. I have now been the Attorney General through the 2020, the 2022, and the 2024 elections, and you can't imagine how much time, energy, and effort is spent by our staff and so many others around the state just to ward off attempts to undermine the electoral process, to suppress people's votes. And I probably, like, at least once a week, it seems like our Secretary of State is sued by the RNC or by the Michigan Republican Party or by other actors in ways where they're just trying to make sure that as few people can vote as possible, and that is especially true in cities that have large populations of Democrats. We work at our office, starting usually about a year before an election. We work with all of law enforcement. So we work with everyone from the state police to county sheriffs to local police departments. We work with all the clerks across the state. We're a very decentralized state. We have something like 1,600 municipal clerks, and the county clerks and the boards of canvasser. I don't know if you remember this, but like when we go back to 2020, you can't even imagine the efforts that had to be made just to ensure that the man who won our presidential election in Michigan by over 154,000 votes was certified as the winner of the presidential election in our state. I mean, it was non-stop having to fight the lawsuits and efforts like the false slate of electors and things that we never would have possibly imagined. And now it's just routine in having to do that. The difference was, I will say, in 2020 is, and I can't believe that sometimes I wake up and I'm like, God, I miss Bill Barr. He was so great. But the fact of the matter was,
I know.
at the end of the day, he did the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't remember that, but he did. Because we had fights with the U.S. attorneys about, being concerned. They started to investigate the election right away when normally they wait until after certification. And, but at the end of the day, they did the right thing. Back in those days, all the way back in 2020, so did the social media platforms. Facebook, and then a platform that was known as Twitter a long time ago, and Google and all the rest. They used to work with us to make sure that they were taking down misinformation and disinformation. Not the case anymore. And that can be very complicated, very difficult. But we even charged a number of people from efforts to undermine the election. And you guys might know about a couple of political operatives named Jack Berkman and Jacob Wall. I charged them back in 2020 for efforts to illegally interfere with the election with predominantly black Detroit voters. And we just finally resolved that case after 5 years. We have all these other cases pending, and they just seemingly go nowhere in the courts because the judges, candidly, are too afraid to touch these cases because, frankly, they're concerned, I think, for their lives. That's just the long and short of it. And so, they just kind of spin in circles and do nothing oftentimes, apparently just trying to wait out, really, probably my time in office. Really, I have one more year at this job. We have term limits in Michigan, and I really think that is what's happening in some of these cases. There's no other way to explain it. But this is now a feature of the job of the AGs, and it's why, candidly, if we don't have Democrats as attorneys general in the swing states, I don't know what hope we're going to have of making sure that in all future elections, that whoever the actual winner of that state is gets their electoral votes. It's deeply concerning, and we're just in a place where, again, like I wasn't so happy with the outcome of the 2024 election in Michigan, I will tell you that. But I acknowledged it. I didn't try to interfere with it. I wasn't Ken Paxton going to the United States Supreme Court trying to tell the judges that they should overturn the will of Michigan voters. But that is who our Republican colleagues are right now, and I'm sorry to say that, but it's just true. The Democratic AGs, we want true democracy, and the Republican AGs are simply beholden to the person who's the current occupant of the White House.
Can I just add on to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just to add on to what Dana said, so we have elections for Attorney General for AG in Michigan to replace Dana, although she's irreplaceable, as you can see. Nevada, Arizona, I'm up for re-election, and Minnesota. So I'm counting swing states.
Is Minnesota a swing state anymore?
Yeah,
Do we
I
have to
don't know.
say
Maybe
that? All right.
it's a little swingy, but and who else?
Georgia.
Wisconsin,
Well,
Georgia.
Yeah, and I mean-
although that's held, it's held by a Republican. But anyway, my point is, to Dana's point, we've got to win. You know, we've to be able to ride through and continue to protect our states and our elections. We've got to win those swing states for sure. And then I would argue to y'all that the most important race on any ballot this year in 2026 is going to be your AG race, because you know, the Supreme Court has now disfavored nationwide injunctions, which means if you don't live in a state with a Democratic AG who's willing to fight and join these lawsuits, you are out of luck, because it's only, the injunctions we're winning are only for our states by and large, for the most part. So it's ironically the Republican states that are getting screwed the most, because they're not, you know, preserving that $2 billion, $1.5 billion, billions of dollars for their states.
Well, we needed more time for this conversation. We're running out of time.
But can I add too?
Yep, go ahead.
Landslide Mays needs everybody's support, because she won by a slim margin.
go.
So if everybody
280.
here supports her, we have to.
Yeah, definitely. Just really quickly, I want to make sure each of you have the last word. We're running out of time because it's been such a great conversation. But as you're thinking about the final things that you share with the audience, I also want to ask this question as well. What do you see as the biggest civil rights battles coming up in the next 2 to 3 years for attorney generals? Because I think that's really important to talk about that now. And I'm going to give you each the floor. This will be the final statement, and hopefully being able to answer this question as well, Attorney General.
I'm going to let Dana or Kris start, only because, again, they are so much more immersed in these issues than I am, that I think their responses will be more
But
interesting.
give us some last words then. Just give what your final
my
comments.
final comments. I want to echo what Dana and Kris have said. The Democratic Attorneys General group is a really extraordinary group of people. And I think it's important that people hear that the egos are checked at the door. I mean, I don't have a very big ego, but there are others who do have bigger egos. But everybody checks their egos at the door. We talk through issues. We fight about issues, but it is always respectful, and it is always with a desire to make sure we do the right thing and do the thing that we need to do to protect democracy.
Thank you, Attorney General Lopez. Thank you so much for joining us.
Gosh, it's hard to pick what the most important or the biggest civil rights battle or rights battle is going to be. I think, and probably Dana probably agrees with this. I think we are headed into very difficult waters with regard to marriage. And I think they're going to attempt to chip away at marriage rights at the federal level. And so we're going to have to remain vigilant about that. I think that what is happening to our immigrant community right now, including our legal or documented or partially documented immigrant community, and also U.S. citizens who are being violated and sometimes brutalized by federal agents, is horrific, and is going to increasingly demand our attention and our pushback, especially as both ICE and Border Patrol become fully staffed with the tens of billions of dollars that they were allotted by Congress in the big horrific bill. And so those would be the two areas that I am really worried about. And then final words, I would say this, again, thank you to this organization for all that you do to protect this beautiful democracy of ours. Every time I file one of these lawsuits with these amazing AGs, I find myself thinking about what previous generations of Americans must be thinking about this moment that we are living through. And I believe in my heart that those generations of Americans who fought and died and sacrificed for this country are speaking to us across the ages. And they are saying to each and every one of us, fight. Fight for your country and do it now, because 2 years from now is too late. So let's do it now.
Attorney General Mays, everybody, thank you. Last word, Attorney General Nessel.
I'm going to say this on behalf of not just myself, but all of my Democratic AG colleagues. And our perspective that I think should be shared by everyone is this. Appeasement does not work. Capitulation does not work. The only thing that a bully like Donald Trump and his administration understand is fighting back, and fighting back with everything that you have. And so what we've seen, whether it's the universities, whether it's the media outlets, whether it's the law firms that just gave in, how'd that work out for you? So what I would say is this: we come together and we do everything we can in our own way to, as aggressively as possible, ensure that we are fighting back each and every time that we have an opportunity to do so, or we're supporting those that do. Because that is the only way that we're really going to be able to preserve this country that we all love so very much. So I hope that you all will join us in this fight with the Democratic AGs and do everything that you can to push back against this lawless administration and to preserve our democracy.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Attorney General Lopez, Mays, and also obviously Nessel. It is amazing to watch you all and hear you talk about how you go day to day and fighting for us, fighting for our democracy. It is the conviction and the courage that you show every day that gives me hope. And it also shows, I think, to the world how important representation is and how representation can lead to transforming how we see the world. And so thank you all for being here. And that's a wrap.